Hi friends, so you might hear some cows in the background. There's cows down there in the field next door to our property, which is kind of sad, but that's how it is when we're living in a non-vegan world. But I wanted to talk about today human supremacy because it's something that afflicts us all, particularly when we're born into a planet which is mostly, humans who believe that animals are our property. And we just are born with that belief that animals are inferior, and we are indoctrinated to believe they're inferior to us because they are different, which is something that we do even to our own species. And but there's a lot of connections between the ideology of human supremacy and other discriminations. Speciesism is what we have towards other animals. And there's racism, sexism, heterosexism, and so forth, ableism, and all these different forms of discrimination that are related to speciesism. They're all faces of the same ignorance. And when I talk about human supremacy, I'm talking about something that we have to, even if we're vegan, we have to work on every day. And the reason I bring it up is because the other day I was listening to someone and they were talking about how wonderful our species is. There's Nandi, he's got his bird be safe collar on. No, we don't like to dress up our cats. So he was talking, this particular person was talking about how wonderful it is what we've done on the planet as a species. He basically said, what other species can, send rockets to the moon, to the moon, and all these technological advances and so forth. Now, I just want to take that apart for a minute and just kind of think about the wisdom that we have used in relation to our technological advances, and how really now we are on the brink of imminent extinction, not only ours but also other animals. And so a lot of the technology that we have brought in has actually been propelled by greed. And there's been no vision with it. There's been no sort of thought about what that might do later on to other animals, to the environment, to our own species, and so forth. And that's something that I think we do again and again as a species, particularly with capitalism at the helm, basically. Whatever we think will get us more income, more profit, and we don't care about the expense. And that's how end-stage capitalism now has brought us to this position. Patriarchy, end-stage capitalism, and neoliberalism has brought us to this. And just our basic own, we humans are just animals like other animals, and we tend to sort of think about ourselves, really. We don't always think about others. So when somebody says something like, well, they'll say, what other species on the planet can do this and can do that? That doesn't really mean much to me, because I look at what we've done, just what I've spoken about, and also how we behave towards other animals, using them, eating, wearing, and using them, and killing them at 1 to 3 trillion animals every single year, torturing and killing them for trivial reasons and mostly palate pleasure. And as a vegan, I know that it's easy to meet all our nutrition requirements from plants and other non-animal sources. You just need a little bit of vitamin B, because vitamin B is a microbe, and it was taken out of the plants and taken out of the water, and so that's something that vegans do need. But basically, we don't need animal products at all to survive. And so why are we doing this to these other animals? Why are these cows crying in that field down there? And it's most likely they're either hungry because they're trapped in a field. And these are the lucky cows, the so-called happy cows. They're trapped in a field, or possibly, and most likely, their calves have been taken from them, because that's what we do. Even on these so-called happy farms, like mom and pop farms and whatever, calves are taken from their mothers at a few days old, and the mothers just cry and cry and cry and cry for days. If you've ever seen a calf being taken from their mother and how the mother and the calf behave, it's just tragic. It's very, very sad. So anyway, that's why they're down there in the field, because we're not vegan, because we don't have a vegan planet. they're locked in that field basically. And as I said, they're the lucky ones because there are a lot of cows that are just in these massive feedlots like in California and being fed grain and things that are totally unsuitable for them. And being, it's just not good for them, and they can't go anywhere. It's just awful. And their calves are taken from them and they're used as resources, and eventually they're all winding up in the same slaughterhouse, whether it's the cows down there or the cows in the feedlots. They're all horrific slaughterhouses. There's no such thing as a humane slaughterhouse. There's no such thing as a good death in slaughterhouses. They're horrific places, and they're full of fear and blood and screaming and all sorts of things. So anyway, I'm getting off the track here, but I sort of find, as a vegan, when I hear people go, well, look, we're just such an incredible species compared to other species. Look at what we've done. I don't see it, because I don't see any wisdom in the sort of technology. Most of the technology, we haven't considered what's going to happen in the future if we continue on. For example, the fossil fuels and all of that, even though the fossil fuel company knew that we were going to have this climate emergency eventually. They knew that back in the 50s and 60s. But, and that's greed for you. But we haven't really thought through a lot of what we've done. And we've also exploited other animals and tortured and killed them because we can. And that's where I bring us to this human supremacist attitude. This human supremacy is at the root of a lot of, if we can persecute 99.99% of the planet, the population who are non-human, because they are different and because they don't have the technological sort of bent that we have, and because they don't speak in the sort of way we do, and they don't look how we do, and all of that, as if that matters. I mean, we can't live underwater, we can't fly without help of some sort of technology, and then meanwhile polluting as we do it. There's a whole lot of things that we can't do, and it doesn't really matter. It's like, for example, our own species. If somebody is disabled in some way, mentally or physically, does that mean that we can exploit them however we wish and kill them? Well, it shouldn't, I hope. It was like that in the beginning of last century. In the 20th century, they used to experiment on disabled people. And they've experimented on black people in the United States, even up until, and they're still doing it, really. This is what otherizing gets us. It gets us violence. It makes groups targets of violence. They were doing syphilis tests on black people a few decades ago, and without their knowledge, giving them syphilis and then following up on that without their knowledge, that kind of thing. There's also, and they've been testing particular drugs on unknowing people in India, children in India, that Gardasil vaccination. They were testing on young girls there, and some died. So this is what otherizing gets us. And, as I said, human supremacy is the same face of all these ignorances. It comes from the same, it's cut from the same cloth. If we're happy to otherize and exploit and kill based on difference, being other animals, just because they're a different species, just because they don't have that technological bent, or they don't have, they aren't like us. If we're willing to do that, then we're also willing to do that to our own species, and we do. So what is really so great about our species, really? I mean, truly and really. If we basically changed the whole climate, where there's 200 species going extinct every day, and we're causing a 6th mass extinction, which we're on the front lines of. What exactly is it about us that we think is so great? I mean, I think we're deluding ourselves when we say how great we are. I don't see it. I really don't. And I think, eventually, and I'm sorry to say this, and I say this without misanthropy, but I really think that the planet and other animals, if there's any left after we go extinct, and I believe we will go extinct this century, probably much sooner than most people think, probably 2060, something like that, 2050. But I think once we're gone, I think if the planet could sigh a relief, it would. And I think that other animals, if there's any left, will be able to. There'll be bacteria that which will evolve into complex life forms eventually, and we'll have a whole different other species, all different kinds of species on the planet. And they won't have to deal with us anymore because. And I don't know if you can see this until you're actually vegan, but sometimes I think it takes becoming vegan to actually see what we're doing to other animals. But if you stop and think for a moment, just put aside your discriminations about what you think about other animals, that they're sweet in their entertainment, or, or in the case of some animal that's sharing your house, they're a family member. They're all like that, what you think about that family member. All of them are sentient and they love life, just like that family member, the dog and cat whom you love. And they wanted to live free of our interference. They loved life and didn't want to die. And today, 200 million plus land animals are being tortured and killed for trivial reasons of mostly palate pleasure. So what are we doing? So, I cannot, when somebody sort of, as a vegan, when someone says, sort of says, look at how incredible our species is. No other species is like us. I think, thank goodness, no other species is like us. And I hope that no other species will be like us again. I really do. And I hope in all the billions of livable planets out in the universe, I hope we never reach those other planets, because I don't want us to take our dysfunction with us. And some people sort of think, oh, well, we can evolve and become different. We can get rid of these sort of dysfunctions. I'm not sure we can really, because we've had a long time now, and at this point it seems to be getting worse. Maybe I'm being pessimistic, or maybe I'm being realistic. Anyway, you can decide yourself what you think. But I hope that we never make it, and I know we will probably won't. Most likely, I could say almost with 100% surety at this point, with how close we are to probable extinction, that we're not going to make it anywhere, including Mars. But just saying, just for some miracle we were to make it out into other livable planets, I would hope that we wouldn't make it there, or if we do that. Who knows what we do to the other species that are on that planet. And it would likely be the same thing that we're doing to these species on the planet. These other species, non-human animals. It's likely we'd do the same thing if we could. You see? So it's just something that, when people sort of have this human supremacist notion, this human supremacist attitude, which we all do if we're not vegan, right? But when they actually come out and say things like, how great we are as a species and all these other species, or how great we are, I think, what are you talking about? I really do. I think, what on earth are you talking about? It's sort of incredulous. I just can't believe it when people say that. So anyway, that's really all I wanted to say. I think that if we were able to live in a very simple way and live in communities again, we'd be a lot more psychologically healthy. If we were able to strip right back our complex way of living. And I don't see, I think that would be very beneficial. And I don't see all these medical advances as great, since they've been torturing and killing millions upon millions, hundreds and hundreds and billions of animals, sentient animals. They've been torturing and killing. Torturing day after day after day. Every year. There's at least 200 million, I think, at this point. And they don't even count the mice and rats and animals like that. They don't even count them in that statistic. But the torturing and killing, like Gandhi said, he didn't think that anything was worth torturing and killing animals like that. The thing is, if we'd actually eaten properly and not started eating animal products, if we'd eaten just the plants and the fruits and the grains and the beans and all of that, we probably wouldn't need most of these medicines we have. That may your medicine be your food. That's so true. that's how I look at food these days, how I look at plants. Of course, I enjoy them, and it's a vegan diet is delicious. A plant-based diet, a balanced plant-based diet is delicious. But I also look at them as medicine. And please check out nutritionfacts.org to find out more about that. It's a science-backed site with information that's collated from the latest journals of medical journals and nutrition journals, science, etc. So I look at each plant that I eat as some kind of medicine. And if we had been all doing that and continued on with what would have been the right thing to do, rather than enslaving and exploiting other animals, if we just continued on the plant-based diet, which is suitable for our body, with the type of metabolisms we have and the intestines and the dentition, etc., completely suited to a plant-based diet, we would have all been much healthier, and we would not have needed all these we wouldn't have been needing all these medicines and medical intervention. We wouldn't be dying of diabetes and heart disease and all of that, which is in epidemic levels now. And we should never have been torturing and killing animals to find these things out, because it would have been much easier if we hadn't thought of them as lesser, to find alternatives to animal torture and experimentation. It would have been much easier, because we could easily have found out a way of doing that without involving torturing and killing animals the way we do. So when necessity calls, that's what happens. People start looking for alternatives, and there are alternatives. So all these medical advances and all this for breast cancer, you see now these breast cancer things where they've got breast cancer pink cartons of eggs. It's ridiculous. These animal products, they're actually causing all these diseases, contributing to them in a massive way. And here we are with pink cartons for breast cancer. These are industries designed to continue that sickness. If you see the film whatthehealth.com, whatthehealthfilm.com, you'll find out more about that, about the diabetes industry and so forth. So anyway, if we'd lived much simpler lives, and we could still do that, and we'll probably be forced to do that in the future. People will be forced to abandon animal products because it's unsustainable, and in fact by 2050 it would be impossible to feed the planet with animal agriculture in the amount of resources it takes up with water and land and all of that, and also the climate. I mean, I heard that there was a farmer in northern New South Wales just recently decided to ditch animal agriculture and start growing chickpeas in the north, because he said it's much more suitable now that there's so much drought in Australia. Lots of people cannot farm cows anymore because they take up tremendous amounts of, it takes tremendous amounts of land and water, and the water is just too scarce now in Australia. Droughts are everywhere. That's what the climate emergency is doing for us here. And things are bursting into flames everywhere. There's fires in Queensland, there's 80 fires or something, and it's not even into spring barely. It's barely into spring. So I was glad to hear that. It's sad that he made that decision because of drought. It would have been much better if he'd made that decision because he thought, I don't want to exploit these cows anymore and take their children from them and kill them. But anyway, that's an example of what's coming now. People are going to have to be swapping over to other forms of agriculture that doesn't involve exploiting non-human animals, because it's actually unsustainable. And if you watch the looming food crisis by Chris Hedges on his show On Contact, that was a few months ago. Right now it's September 2019, but I'll leave a link in the information section if you check that out, and check out The End of Ice also with Dar Jamal. That's also On Contact with Chris Hedges. Check out both of those videos and you'll understand why we need to stop what we're doing and we need to change our way of living, and that starts with going vegan. Something that we don't have to ask we don't have to ask corporations permission, we don't have to ask our parents permission, we don't have to ask our family and friends permission to be vegan, we don't have to ask the government's permission to be vegan. And if you're in non-violent civil disobedience with Extinction Rebellion, and that's a good cause, it's a very good thing to do. I think it's imperative at this point to do non-violent civil disobedience. But if you're not vegan, you need to ask yourself why, and I've done a couple of videos on that. So I'm not going to go into that. but please check them out on Faint Signals from Vega. There is no excuse. It's being a science denier to not be vegan, and it's also participating in tremendous violence is completely unnecessary. So if you're in Extinction Rebellion, you're joining those groups, and someone from Extinction Rebellion from their website said to me, "Oh, we welcome vegans and non-vegans. You know, we don't want to basically lay down the law and tell people to go vegan." That's actually just a very disingenuous excuse. They don't want to tell people to go vegan because they want donations and they don't want to challenge their non-vegan donor base. That's part of it. And they don't want to be unpopular in any way. But it's the right thing to do to ask people to go vegan. It's the right thing to do to be vegan. That's not a judgment, it's a fact. It's elitist to continue eating animal products at this point. It is elitist. It's causing world hunger because a lot of countries are exporting grain that they cannot afford to export to feed animals in feedlots. The Amazon rainforest has been destroyed at 2 acres and a half a minute because Bolsonaro in Brazil has upped the exploitation. It used to be 1 acre a minute, and I've been talking about this for years now. I've been vegan for 15 years, and I've been talking about it for almost as long as that. And it's been going on for years now. The acre a minute of Amazon rainforest and other forests being destroyed for animal agriculture and soy to feed animals in animal feedlots all over the world. So it's elitist not to be vegan. It's not a religion, it's not a diet, it's an ethical position, and we need to embrace it, particularly now, because we're on the edge of extinction, and even though it may not be able to stop our own extinction, it can mitigate the disaster, the catastrophe that's about to happen. And maybe some animals might survive. We probably will not. I'm pretty sure we won't. But other animals there will be other animals that will survive. So that's the least we can do, seeing we've destroyed their planet for them. This human supremacist attitude that we're so fantastic because we can do this and that. I think we've made an incredible mess of things, and we've spent our time throughout history enslaving one another, our own species. We've spent our time raping and killing and pillage and plundering and warring. There's never been so many wars on the planet so widespread right now as there is right now for resources and for hegemony. What other animal fouls their nest like this? That's a basic thing. So no, we're not fabulous. We're not supreme over all creation. We're not the crown of creation. We've got to snap out of that. And I think once you become vegan, you'll understand. If you don't understand already what I'm talking about, you'll understand it once you become vegan. It'll become clearer and clearer every day that we are a real problem, and that it won't get any better. We have to start behaving like a decent species on the planet and start treating other animals with respect. And that means to not exploit them, and that means to think of them before we do anything, to try and think about these animals and how we're just taking and taking and taking away their habitat. We're in overshoot and collapse as a species right now, and there might be 10 billion people on the planet by 2050. I don't think there will be. I think by that stage we will be in some sort of mass starvation because our agriculture is already on the brink. Agriculture is already suffering because of the dramatic weather changes, droughts and floods, and and too hot for plant species. And food, is very, these fruit trees and other plants are very sensitive to these dramatic changes back and forth. But we've been taking and taking and taking, and we've made such a mess here. So no, we're not fabulous as a species. We're not. Individually, there's lovely people on the planet. There's a lot of lovely people. And I don't want to see anybody suffer. But it's just sort of like we're in overshoot and collapse, and it's insane. And the people who say, oh, overpopulation is some sort of this idea that overpopulation is a problem, that's a hoax, some sort of hoax. I mean, get a grip, is all I say to that. If you shove enough people in a room, eventually there's going to be no room, and there's going to be no food and water. And you're going to destroy things, and you're going to destroy each other. It's just, you know, I don't know what's wrong with people that they start going that there's no such thing as overpopulation, that's some sort of a myth or something. I'm just astonished. You know, and then there's some people, otherwise intelligent people, saying that climate change isn't real. The climate crisis is not real. They think it's some sort of a green hoax so that capitalism can thrive again. And I mean, you know, you couldn't make this stuff up. You know, that corporations are using it to make money. Well, even if that's the case, and I'm sure in some cases it is, so what? It's actually it's actually improving things. I mean, I would rather some corporations make money off improving the situation and reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, etc., than the other way. So I don't even know what people, even if that was the case, that it was some sort of hoax, which it isn't. If you're a science denier, then, you know, you must be a science denier if you think it's a hoax. But just say that was the case. You know, it's just astonishing to me. I don't know. Anyway, that's all I want to say. I just wanted to talk about human supremacy, and I was just so astonished when I heard that person say how great we are. And I thought, really, have you looked at the mess things are in? The people are homeless and they're suffering and starving, and look what we're doing to non-human animals. And have you really looked at it? Is this the sort of species that we want to be? What kind of species do we want to be? What vision do we have? I think that's why so many people love Star Trek. Because it's some sort of vision of the future where there is no money. I don't know why they still replicate animal products, but there you go. I find that bizarre. There's all sorts of kind of bizarre little things in the Star Trek things, particularly in the early Star Trek with the sexism and all of that. But the basic vision of Star Trek is sort of, in some ways, a good one. Of money being of no relevance. Of course, there'll still be greed and all of that, and people wanting power. But that's why I think people love Star Trek, because it's an alternative to the crazy-making, mental health-destroying, neoliberal, capitalist, end-stage capitalist nightmare that we have right now, right? Anyway, thanks so much for watching. My name is Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the notifications bell, otherwise you don't receive updates when I drop a video. I've been a little bit busy lately because it's getting into spring and we have a property, and there's fruit trees and all sorts of things that I have to do, but I try and get some videos out when I can. So thanks so much for watching. Till next time. Bye for now.